Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. It's exactly 24 hours since Prashant Bhushan and Yogendra Yadav were removed from the Aam Aadmi Party's Political Affairs Committee. Since then, Yogendra Yadav has given a spate of interviews, but now speaking for the first time since that dramatic development is Prashant Bhushan. He is my exclusive guest tonight. Prashant Bhushan, let's start with Mayank Gandhi's blog, which was published this morning. In the blog, Mr. Gandhi says that before that meeting, or at the beginning of that meeting of the National Executive, you and you and Yogendra Yadav made two proposals to sort out your problematic membership of the PAC, and that those proposals were conciliatory and non-contentious, that they could have, if they were accepted, sorted out the problem. How were those proposals received by the other members of the National Executive?
Well, I don't want to comment on the details of what happened in that meeting. Mayank has written about them in his blog, and you know the decision or the resolution that was passed in that meeting.
But I'd simply ask, how did the other members of the National Executive respond to those proposals? Did they welcome them? Did they feel that this was a solution?
Well, I don't want to get into the details of that because we have been asked not to speak about what happened in that meeting.
All right. Mayank Gandhi also says that after those two proposals were made, Manish Sisodia took a break, and Mayank Gandhi says he then consulted what's called the Aam Aadmi Party's Delhi team. I believe that, in fact, it wasn't the Delhi team Manish Sisodia consulted. He directly rang up and spoke to Arvind Kejriwal and consulted him. Am I right?
Well, I mean, you are free to draw your own conclusions. I can't say. You'll have to ask Manish Sisodia about that.
What I'm suggesting is that, in fact, the decision not to accept the two conciliatory proposals made by you and Yogendra Yadav, and to instead move a resolution to vote you off the PAC, that was something that happened under the instructions and at the behest of Arvind Kejriwal.
I think that would be a fair conclusion for anybody to draw in the circumstances.
Then let me talk to you a little bit about Arvind Kejriwal. To me, it seems as if Arvind Kejriwal has become the sort of person who will not tolerate on the PAC people who differ from his views, worse still, people who disagree with his views sometimes. Is that a correct characterization of Arvind Kejriwal?
Well, I have had discussions with Arvind about these issues on several occasions. I have told him that while he is a great leader with a lot of very admirable qualities, but he also has some defects which need to be seriously recognized, and he recognizes that he does have at least differences with me on those issues. One of them, I said, was that he wants to dominate the decision making in the party, and I said that, look, it's important, though most of your decisions, most of your political impulses are correct, and I duly defer to them because I believe that your political judgment is better than mine. But there may be occasions where your political judgment may not be correct, and therefore it is very important in a national political party like ours to have a broad-based, independent-minded decision-making team which can differ with you and stand up to you. It's very important to have that kind of team in decision-making bodies so that decisions are not controlled by any one person, however bright and politically sagacious that person might be.
When you made this point to him, that on the occasions when his opinion is not right, you need a broad team that can differ with him and stand up to him, when you said that to him, what was his response?
He said that, well, in our PAC we have a broad team which can stand up to me. What's the problem with that?
Except for the fact that the two people who did... except for the fact that the two people who did sometimes stand up to him, you and Yogendra Yadav, have been removed from the PAC.
Well, that could also be on account of his perception that we sometimes have very violent disagreements, that there has been a breach of trust, etc., or there has been a breakdown of trust, etc. He may be harboring that perception, and from his point of view, I mean, perhaps from the kind of things that the inputs that he gets from various people around him, that might be a legitimate perception that he might be having from his point of view.
Have people filled his ears against you and Yogendra Yadav? Have people whispered things in his ears to create mischief and trouble between the two of you and him?
That could have been happening. That's quite possible. That's quite possible in my view.
Has he, over the last couple of years, as he's become more successful and more popular, has he also become more autocratic, less tolerant of differing views and more insistent that he's the only way?
Well, I'm not sure whether he has become like that or whether he was even earlier like that, but he was certainly somebody who wanted to dominate decision making, and perhaps on occasions he has said that he has always been in organizations where he has been able to dominate decision making, and that as convener he needs to have the right to take a final decision after he has heard the views of members of the Political Affairs Committee.
So as convener he wanted veto powers for himself, is that right?
Yes, he felt that so long as he is convener, I mean, he feels that that's his personal style of functioning. So long as he is convener, he needs to have the power to take decisions and lead the party in the way that he thinks fit, in the way he thinks appropriate.
So there are certain autocratic, certain sort of dictatorial tendencies in his style of leadership and in his desire to have the last final word.
I mean, I won't use those words, but yes, he does want to dominate decision making, and that's an issue that I have disagreed with him on several occasions and have warned him about, and have said that this requires that there needs to be a broad-based and independent-minded decision-making panel which can stand up to you and tell you that you are wrong if they feel strongly about it.
Now, one of the things that was apparent yesterday evening when that vote was taken to remove you from the PAC is that it was only by a small majority that you got voted out, 11-8. And I believe the majority would have been even smaller if some of the people who should have been present and voting were present and voting. But even though they weren't, 11-8 does not suggest that there was an overwhelming majority against you or in Arvind Kejriwal's favor. How do you interpret those 11-8 figures?
No, it's true that it was that the people in the national executive were divided on this, but the majority was definitely of the view that we should not be there in the PAC.
But even though the majority was of the view you shouldn't be in the PAC, a fairly sizable minority, 8 out of 19, actually agreed with your views, sympathized with your position, and thought the stand you were taking was the right one.
Yes, that's a matter of record.
Let me come to something that Yogendra Yadav wrote in a famous letter that was leaked in June last year. He described Arvind Kejriwal as a supremo. He said, the party is falling prey to the disease of a personality cult. More importantly, he wrote, major decisions in the party appear to and indeed do reflect the wishes of one person. I take it that these views are very reflective of your own thinking, and these have been expressed since at least June last year. In other words, these are issues you've been raising for 9 months with Arvind Kejriwal and within the party without getting an adequate response.
Well, Yogendra Yadav's letter is also a matter of record. He has not described Arvind as a supremo. He has said that we must beware of the supremo cult which is there in other political parties, and our party should not fall prey to the same kind of supremo cult or high command culture, etc. These are certainly serious dangers that have arisen within our party also, which we need to certainly be very wary of, and that is why it is essential that we should have a transparent decision-making system. Our decisions and minutes must be properly and duly recorded, that we must have regular meetings of the decision-making bodies, and that these decision-making bodies must be broad-based and must consist of independent-minded people who can also stand up and tell Arvind that we feel that you are wrong on this.
I want very much to come to the other concerns that you've raised. They were raised in a letter that you wrote on the 26th of February. But before I come to those concerns, let me put to you two of the charges made against you. Mayank Gandhi, in that blog that I referred to a moment ago, says that you have threatened during the Delhi election campaign on multiple occasions to hold press conferences against the party because of your concerns with candidate selection. In other words, he's suggesting, without saying it in so many blunt words, that you were almost sabotaging the party's interests.
Well, I had said that there are several issues which have arisen, including the issue of candidate selection. And if those issues, especially the one of candidate selection, is not addressed in some proper manner, then I am afraid that I will have to resign, because if the party gets derailed from its original principles, and if I come to the conclusion that it has firmly got derailed from its original founding principles, and that there is no reasonable hope of retrieving it back to its original principles, then I will be forced to resign and make public the reasons for my resignation.
Were you, in raising these issues and threatening to hold public conferences that would be against the interests of the party, undermining the party during the critical Delhi election campaign?
No, in fact, I was trying to ensure that the party remains true to its founding principles and ideals and does not deviate and deflect in a major way from those principles and ideals.
Now, a second member of your party, Ashish Khaitan, originally tweeted, although he has withdrawn that tweet, but he did originally tweet that the Bhushan family was claiming to be objecting to the one-man-centric nature of Aam Aadmi, and in other words, the control of Arvind Kejriwal. But what they wanted was to replace Arvind Kejriwal's control with the Bhushan family control. In other words, this was a sort of attempt at taking over the Aam Aadmi party by the Bhushan family.
Well, nothing can be more ridiculous than that. See, I am not even a full-time member of the party. I am primarily a public interest lawyer practicing in the courts. I see my role in the party primarily as one to try and keep the party firmly on its track and committed to its founding principles and ideals, apart from being a legal advisor to the party, etc. So far as my father is concerned, I mean, in our party there is a principle of one man, one post. There is no question of his holding any post in any decision-making body of the party. He was only as an elder trying to advise the party on certain things where he felt that his advice might be useful. He might be wrong on certain things. We might disagree with him on certain things. I do disagree with him on many things. But that does not mean that he is not free to give his advice as an elder of the party who has also contributed substantially to the founding of the party. My sister had left a very lucrative job in the US to come and work full-time only for the purpose of helping set up the organization systems within the party, or the systems within the organization of the party, as an organizational development advisor. She was not seeking any post in any executive body, etc. It's ridiculous to talk about our trying to take over the party.
Let me now come to some of the issues and concerns that you raised in your letter of the 26th of February. The first is to do with the fact that although the Aam Aadmi Party puts up on the website every donation it receives, it doesn't put up any information about how the money is spent and how the expenses that it's paying are paid. And you have the following sentence in your letter: there is no systematic planning of how these funds are to be spent. We do not have any empowered committee or decision-making system of deciding how the funds are to be spent, with the result that such decisions are being made in an arbitrary manner by a few people who are not authorized by the national executive to take such decisions. That sounds like a very damning verdict on the fact that there is no transparency and no accountability on how you spend the money you receive.
See, I don't want to get into the details of what I have written in my letter. That's a letter which I had addressed to the National Executive. But it is true that I had raised concerns about several issues and several systems within the party, including the system of putting our expenses on the website, as well as decision-making process about the expenditure of funds, etc. These concerns were raised only from the point of view of putting in place systems which will ensure that all this is correct for the future.
You know, when you write that decisions to spend money are made in an arbitrary manner by just a few people who are not authorized by the national executive to take these decisions, are you suggesting that Arvind Kejriwal, perhaps a small group of people around him, are the ones who decide how the money is spent, and that they do it without any accountability, they do it arbitrarily as they think fit?
See, I am just saying that the party right now does not have proper systems in place by which authorizations, budgets, decision making about spending, etc. can be taken. And therefore, that is not being taken in a very systematic, organized, well thought out manner. These systems need to be put in place.
Now, there's something else you wrote about in that letter of the 26th of February. You said that meetings of the Political Affairs Committee are infrequent. Some of the members are not even informed and therefore they are absent. You say several of the decisions need to be taken, in fact, by the national executive, but they're not. They're taken by the PAC instead. You also say that PAC minutes are not always made available to the national executive and they're not always ratified. Again, that suggests a very ad hoc and arbitrary way of taking decisions.
You see, I don't want to get into the details of what I had written in that letter. That's a letter addressed to the national executive. But as I said, you see, I have raised concerns about many systems in the party which need to be set right and brought on track in order to maintain our commitment to transparency, accountability, Swaraj and inner party democracy.
In fact, the conclusion that emerges from what I've quoted about expenses and what I've quoted about decision making and the functioning of the PAC is that transparency is often missing, accountability is less than it should be, that Aam Aadmi actually has a high command culture, much like, say, the Congress party or the BJP, and that high command or a coterie around the high command does what they want and the institutions that should function don't function.
Well, I have raised concerns about systems and the breakdown of certain systems, etc., and said that certain more robust systems need to be put in place to ensure that this breakdown does not happen.
Now, obviously, these are issues that you must have raised before your letter of the 26th of February. You must have been raising them for several weeks, if not several months. What response did you get from Arvind Kejriwal when you spoke to him about the arbitrary way expenses are handled, the ad hoc manner in which decisions are taken, or the rather strange way the PAC functions or doesn't function? What response did he give you?
No, to be fair and honest, these were not really systematically discussed with Arvind or in any other forum, etc. But these have been arising from time to time, and I have put them forth in this for this national executive meeting which was happening after the elections, so that, because see, in a new party, particularly in a party which has been fighting elections one after another, it does happen that many of these systems are not put in place, or there are slippages in many of these systems. That's quite natural. But you see, at least after the Delhi elections, the time had come to put these systems firmly in place in order to ensure that there are no slippages in future.
Your letter was written on the 26th of February. That's exactly a week ago to the day. Did you get any response from Arvind Kejriwal?
Well, unfortunately, there has been a breakdown of communication between me and Arvind, and perhaps I am also to blame for that breakdown in communication. Unfortunately, there has been no communication since then, or even before that for some time.
A couple of last questions. Are you disillusioned with the Aam Aadmi Party?
No, I am concerned about the Aam Aadmi Party. I feel that this is a party which has been created and built with the idealism, sweat and tears of so many idealistic people, volunteers, supporters, etc., who wanted to build a different kind of political party, who were not interested in making a conventional political party which function on this high command culture, or which function on without transparency, or which use money and liquor in politics, or which select candidates without any ideological congruence, etc., purely for expedient reasons, etc. That's not the kind of party that our volunteers had given up so much to build. These volunteers are very concerned, same way that I am concerned about it, and therefore we are trying, and we will try everything to ensure that the party remains committed to its founding principles, remains true to its ideals, and does not fall foul of the aspirations and expectations which millions of people in this country repose in the Aam Aadmi Party.
Two quick questions, and then I'll have to end the interview because we're out of time. We're going to hit the 9 o'clock news. In your letter of the 26th of February, you say that even as late as November, just before the actual dissolution of the Assembly, attempts were made surreptitiously to seek Congress support to form the government again in Delhi without having to contest elections. At the time, when this was rumoured, Arvind Kejriwal rubbished it and said it was not true. You've made this categorically in your letter of the 26th of February. Is this a fact? Do you stand by it?
You see, I don't want to discuss the details of that letter here. This is a letter addressed to the National Executive.
But do you stand by that point? Do you stand by that claim?
I don't want to say anything about that. I don't want to...
My last question. Does the party need to investigate and ask probing questions of itself regarding those 50 lakh checks and the way they were credited and the way they were allegedly looked into by the PAC before they were credited? Is there an area there of inquiry that needs to be undertaken?
Yes, there is an inquiry which needs to be undertaken in order to ensure that such lapses do not happen in future. Obviously, there has been a lapse in our accepting these funds from companies whose antecedents we did not quite verify, and that needs to be set right for the future.
And does the finger of responsibility point towards Arvind Kejriwal? Were the lapses in checking his responsibility?
No, no, that doesn't point to Arvind Kejriwal.
Okay.
The secretary of the party was supposed to accept these donations or deal with these donations, etc. But there has been a lapse in the systems of the party. in our systems of verification, etc. Clearly, that was a lapse.
All right, you're being very honest. I thank you, Prashant Bhushan, for getting in touch and offering this interview. I'm very grateful that you've explained in some detail the nature of the concerns you have with your party, how deep they run, and what sort of response you've had from Arvind Kejriwal, as well as the nature of your concern with his style of leadership. Thank you very much for speaking to the point. And there we end this particular episode. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.